I'm here today in my capacity as the director of Haystack Scholars. I'd like to welcome everybody to our first Digital Fridays event of the 2021-2022 academic term. Just a little bit about Haystack before I pass it on to our presenters today, who will be leading us through a wonderful discussion about how to be a humanist in tech. Haystack stands for Humanities, Arts, Science, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory. We're an interdisciplinary community of humanists, artists, social scientists, and technologists changing the way we teach and learn. Our 1,600 plus members, 16,000 plus members from over 400 affiliate organizations share ideas, news, tools, research, insights, pedagogy, methods, and projects, and collaborate on various Haystack initiatives. So one of those Haystack initiatives is this webinar series, Digital Fridays. It's a webinar series that's entirely led by our scholars. Scholars conceive and organize these discussions, and we kind of just hold the space for them. So if there are Haystack scholars out there who are interested in signing up for Digital Fridays coming up, we'll be sending around a sign-up sheet for the coming year, early in the coming week. The last thing I want to say is that we are accepting applications for Haystack scholars for this coming year. We just opened up applications last week and the due date is October 15th. If you are interested in applying for Haystack scholars, there's information on our website. That's haystack.org. And yeah, so let me introduce our panelists today. Today's discussion, How to Be Humanist in Tech, will be led by Lisa Tagliaferri, Director of Developer Research in Education at Sourgraph, Erin Glass, Manager at Developer Education at DigitalOcean, Jeanelle Horcasitas, Associate Developer and Educator at DigitalOcean, and Michelle McSweeney, Data Scientist, Domain Lead at Code Academy. I will pass it on to them. If you have any questions, there will be a discussion at the end, so please leave your questions in the chat. Otherwise, take it away.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. I think I could provide a little bit of context. I shared the slide deck. It's open to everybody to look at. I will also share it on my screen as long as I'm able to do so. Yeah. So I'm Lisa. I'm Director of Developer Education at Sourcegraph. I've been in the tech industry since 2016 when I was ABD. My PhD was in comparative literature and Renaissance studies at the City University of New York Graduate Center. There's a few other folks from CUNY here today. I was also a Haystack scholar. I was a Futures Initiative Fellow with Kathy Davidson and Katina Rogers, who recently moved on from the program, but I have lots of wonderful memories, and I'm very grateful to Haystack and the Futures Initiative for informing my work and career path. I thought about bringing these folks together with some of this discourse that's been going on Twitter lately. Here's a few examples. Lots of, we know we don't have to belabor the tenure track job market, but I want to kind of talk about what the humanities education in at the graduate level can provide and what it can offer into other industries. And I think there's actually lots of great things that we have as humanists, as researchers, as educators that we can bring with us into different industries. Our background today is a technical background, we're all in tech industry, but you don't necessarily need to be a programmer to join tech. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But I think that it's actually there's lots of positive things in bringing your training into different spaces. There's lots of ways that you could use the humanities in tech. And I think that we could definitely use more humanistic inquiry and humanistic thought in these different spaces to kind of, eradicate silos, make sure people are doing things more intentionally, and to inform the way that we move forward as innovators in society, and also welcome more people in, I hope too. So this is our wonderful panel. I already introduced myself. Erin, would you like to intro yourself too?
Sure, yes, just found the unmute button. Thank you so much for this. Also, I just thank you, Lisa, for organizing this. You're just awesome how you're continuing to open doors for folks in the humanities in tech, including myself. So I have a PhD from CUNY, the CUNY Graduate Center, as many folks in this panel do, in English, and I focus on digital humanities. My research was really about the sort of politics of the adoption of tech in higher education. And I was really someone who wanted to make a career. I wanted a tenure track job in higher ed. I moved, I had various different roles after I graduated, including working in the library as a digital scholarship librarian at UCSD. But just sort of keeping track of what Lisa was doing in tech really helped me realize that the work I was doing in academia as a humanist might be useful in the tech industry and helping make tech a more diverse and inclusive space. So I started working at DigitalOcean, I guess about 1.5 years ago, and am really just trying to pay back that favor of being shown that there's spaces for us humanists to work in tech, and that's why I'm here today, because I want to help open that door for other folks too. So that's me. Was there something else I was supposed to say, or just a general introduction, Lisa?
Yeah, just an intro. And pass.
Okay.
Jeanelle, would you like to intro quick?
Yes, hi everyone. Sorry, I'm just reading where everyone's coming from. So happy to be here. I'm Jeanelle Horcasitas, and I finished my PhD in 2020. I'd like to forget about that year, but it was definitely a very memorable time and difficult as far as what there was to do next. But I did my PhD in literature and cultural studies at UC San Diego. And my research was on speculative fiction by people of color and how they use it as a tool for social justice to create better worlds, more inclusive and just worlds. And so I spent about 1 year still in higher ed doing career and professional development for actually it was about 1.5 years. And while I was doing that, I was doing some freelance writing and work for some different folks. And I was doing writing some digital humanities articles. And so I was definitely, like as Erin was saying, trying to stay connected in these different spaces. And so I actually just started my position not that long ago. I'm pretty new to the space, and so far I've been learning a lot, and hopefully can share some of my experiences and insight from what I've noticed so far. But thank you all for having me. Thanks, Lisa, for inviting me.
I'll go next. So my name is McSweeney. I did my PhD in linguistics, also at the CUNY Graduate Center, and I finished in 2016. And promptly, like many of the people here, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on a tenure track type of thing. I did a postdoc at Columbia, which was awesome and amazing. And I quickly realized that I was not going to get a tenure track in New York City, and I wasn't gonna leave New York. So the next option was obviously tech. And I was so curious, what do people do all day? So I worked in a small social media analytics company for a while. And now I'm the domain lead for the data science content at Codecademy, which is amazing because it allows me to incorporate my love of teaching and love of education into tech and still use my critical thinking and research skills that I learned in my PhD program. So, and I will I have no other language for this. I will popcorn back to Lisa.
Also, yeah, so I have a few guiding questions which we circulated a little before the panel. The first one is, how did you describe your humanities training in your resume and cover letter when applying for tech jobs? Jeanelle, I thought you wanted to give some feedback there.
Oh, sure. So I think I volunteered to give some feedback because it was more fresh in my mind. Although I'm starting to forget that now. It's going away, those memories. But for the job that I'm in, I was really attracted to the role and the title itself, developer educator, because a lot of the job description had things that jumped out to me as far as, you know, do you like writing? Do you like researching? Do you care about educating folks, making tech more accessible? And so all of these things were part of my cover letter as far as what I had done before, but what I didn't spend too much time on that. I would say for the resume, I really tried to tailor it to the experiences that were relevant to what the job was looking for. So I emphasized a lot of what I did, especially with the digital humanities and that had to do with writing or research or any of the very beginner level tech skills that I had done and helped with when I was at UCSD. And for the cover letter, I felt that was more of a, I would say, the personal side of me, where I brought in a little bit about what made me want to be in the education space, why it was important to be in a tech space where I could make that more accessible for folks, especially for historically underrepresented communities. That was really important to me. And weaving that in a little bit with the research that I had done for my dissertation. So I tried to leverage different parts of what I actually did in, I guess, my academic training and how that research came up in my life as an educator, as well as the more core skills of I learned to write well, learned to research well, and teaching was a big part of it, and translating a lot of these complex topics into something that folks could understand that was more digestible. So I would say the resume, it's a pain, but if you really sit down and look at the job description and take that into account and, you know, switch some words, making sure that you're applying or it's represented in there, it's worth it, because folks are looking at it closely and they can tell if you've read it or not. And it always makes a big difference to customize it. And like I said, I know it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it.
Michelle or Erin, did you want to add anything? Also from the hiring manager perspective, I thought what might be interesting too.
Yeah, I could just say, I could plus one a lot of the things Jeanelle was saying, like, you know, emphasizing the humanities probably, you know, if you just say, oh, you know, I've done work in the humanities, I've done a lot of research, writing, teaching, I don't think that will necessarily be legible to hiring managers. But if you can look at the job description, as Jeanelle was saying, and see like what kinds of skills are they looking for, and, you know, how have you sort of grown those skills in your humanities research, teaching, or right, all the many roles you end up sort of carrying as a humanities graduate student, right? I'm sure there were different sort of department projects you're working on, or maybe grant projects, or one thing, you know, Lisa's talked to me about this before, like has teaching, can you talk about teaching in ways that translates to sort of more industry specific roles, like leading people or managing people? So I think you can, you know, if you take a sort of more flexible perspective, you can think about how the activities you did in the humanities translate to more industry specific roles. Another thing I know we're going to talk about a little bit later is that, right, the job opportunities out there in tech aren't just related to technical roles. Like content writing is a big thing, and we can talk more later, but I just think it's worth bookmarking that here, because some of you folks, I know I'm looking at your introductions and a lot of you have digital humanities experience or some sort of technical experience, but I'm sure many of you don't. And I don't want you to come away thinking like, oh, there's no place for me in tech. I think there are. And so, yeah. But Michelle, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
Yeah, just 1 + 1 to all of that. But like from the hire, so this is the second time I've gotten to hire out like a team, right? And the thing that I will say over and over again is that I get resumes, and we are trained in our PhD programs and our master's programs to talk about our research and to talk about this niche thing and like why it's important and like justify why it's important. As a hiring manager, I do not care about that incredibly cool thing that you have been researching, like at all. What I care about is that you have taken this incredibly large project, organized it, gotten all of the things done, and gotten that project done. Because I might be overstating the case, but in every single tech company, we're trying to get projects done. And like, everybody who's written a thesis or written a dissertation has done that. So what I look for people who like are pretty fresh out of school is if they recognize that they've done that, and then how that applies directly to this specific job. Because for me, when I'm reading a cover letter, or like less so a resume, but like when I'm reading a cover letter, I don't actually care how cool you are. Everyone is super cool. But I care that you know that you can take that coolness and apply it to our problem. And like making that connection and doing that cognitive work is something that we're trained to do in grad school, but we don't always realize translates directly in to like writing that cover letter. And it's like, oh, I'm so cool and perfect to solve your problem. And this is why like that connection is made. Which, Baker, to your point, I think you're asking about red flags about like what you shouldn't include. Please don't go on about your thesis or your dissertation. Like I as a human love it. I as a hiring manager, like I don't.
Thanks for the advice.
Anytime.
Yeah, to +1 on that, I think there's also transferable skills in the humanities and in like academic training, like, you know, broadly. So like the dissertation, like getting stakeholders to buy into your argument is like a very good one. I have found in my interviewing that teaching skills, like even if it's not for like an educator or trainer role, that they're always really, really valued, which was a little surprising to me that people would be really, really interested in my teaching, because it meant that I could distill like information from like one subject matter to another. As a hiring manager, I do want like synthesis in the materials, like not an academic CV is way too long. And what helps me a lot is when there are like numbers attached to the output that you've done, or like, I think that if like for me, like I understand what a PhD is, but it's not very legible for a lot of people who are hiring in tech. So kind of explaining like how many people are accepted to your program, like have you gotten really competitive fellowships, like having like numbers attached to that, having numbers attached to like publications, like how many people get published in the journal, things like that could be really helpful, like having the number of students that you've taught, the number of classes you've taught, like all like anything that's kind of concrete there, I think could help a lot. I do think that when I have interviewed, people have been interested in my research projects because it's so different, and because I was able to talk about them from a technical perspective because I did digital humanities work. So nobody like in the jobs that I have had, have ever used Python to look at medieval, like 14th century texts, and they think it's really interesting. So it's like it could be a good place to talk about that, like as long as you're highlighting the skills that are appropriate to the job, and it's something that's very novel, so it helps you stand out in that interview process, I think. So I'll skip to the how do you use the humanities in your everyday work? I know Erin and I have been talking about that a bit, and Erin, do you have a answer now?
The thing that comes to the top of my mind right now, and I'll probably change later on how I'd prioritize this, but what I've been thinking about lately is like, how is your role in your company and your team like a form of a dissertation? Like, how can you treat it as a research object that you're trying to figure out, like, what are the key themes here? What are we trying to do? And like, how can we research things and think outside of the box in ways that maybe our company or team isn't already doing? And I see that as like a sort of humanities research project. And you're also, of course, taking into consideration, other things that you care about that, that might have informed your humanities work, like social context or ethics or, diversity, things like that. So that just comes top to mind, but I don't know. I'll let other folks speak too. What about Jeanelle?
I think the one that I think of the most is asking good questions or knowing what questions to ask. And as you get, well, for me, someone new, as I'm starting to understand more, starting to get more comfortable, I am learning more about the right questions to ask, some of the questions that people aren't thinking about, kind of like what Erin was saying, like thinking outside of the box that maybe someone isn't noticing, and bringing it up and thinking about things creatively, which we do a lot when we're thinking through our research and writing and talking to different committee members, different folks on campus, and you can do that same type of thing. And for me, I think that's one of the most valuable parts of at least my humanities training, was knowing how to ask good questions and hopefully getting answers. But if not, that's what we do. We try to find the answer somehow. We talk to different folks and we do the research that we need to do.
Yeah, agreed that like asking good questions is a key way that like any humanities training, no matter which side of it you fall on, like teaches you to do. That is not it's a much less common skill than you might think, right? Like people have a lot of answers, but it is very hard to come up with a very good question, The other thing that I find myself using that I know came from my like graduate training was how to like think through a problem and break it down into its constituent parts, which like that is the highest level definition of like something called object-oriented programming. But surprisingly, like I personally find that people with any kind of humanities background are much better at doing than my engineers, right? Like being able to take these really complex, really like interdependent problems and break them apart and say, okay, like this is the boundary that we're going to draw on this problem while we like, before we solve this next one. Is I think something that you do when you're like thinking through your research projects itself is like compartmentalizing these things. That is very applicable in day-to-day life. That's great. Lisa, I'll pop back to you.
Sure. I know, Jeanelle, you had some questions in the doc. Is there one that you wanted to ask here? We're almost at halftime. Yeah.
let's see. I think this one might be good because this is the question I had while I was doing a lot of informational interviews. What can current PhD students do to explore tech as a possible career path? What are some ways they can, maybe talk to folks or do some training? Where could they start if maybe they're not so sure if this is for them? I can just say I spent some time doing informational interviews, and I highly recommend doing that if you haven't before. It can be very laid back and low key, 15-20 minute chat. And being part of the Haystack community, you have so many folks in your network that you can potentially talk to. And it's just learning more about what someone does and what they like about it, what they don't like about it, how they got into it. And it was very helpful for me as I was thinking through what I could bring to the space and what they were looking for, and also just knowing about when the opportunities came up, because usually if you know someone that helps with, okay, there's this job coming out you should apply to, or if they hear about it on some other network. So that would be my main thing, is just talk to a lot of people about whatever career or role that you might be interested in.
Jeanelle, how did you find people to interview?
Yeah, sorry, you just opened the door behind me. I was going on LinkedIn, and I was part of alumni networks that sometimes I would know them, or they were like a second connection. So I knew someone and they knew them. So I've asked before, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? I'm interested in, at the time I was interested in UX research, for instance. So they're sure, made the connection, and I could talk with them. And I had put together a little interview spreadsheet where I was just kind of tracking who I had spoken to and the different roles available. And we'll all probably talk about this later, but I didn't realize, there were so many different opportunities within tech that didn't require me to be someone who knew computer programming or had to be highly skilled in some of those subjects. And that had always been something that made me feel, or that gave me pause, I guess. I didn't necessarily feel if I don't know these things, I won't be good enough for this. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. So I think talking with people made me feel better, because it was very empowering to hear, hey, you did this, you did X, Y, and Z, you would be great for this, or you could contribute in these ways, and you have your training has a lot of value. It's a lot about how we were saying earlier, how you translate that to people in industry, because it's very different. You're not talking about your research project necessarily. You're talking about the skills that you've taken. You're talking about teamwork that you've done. If there's projects that you've led, if there's internships that you were part of, different groups that you contributed to a project for. So you're emphasizing different things in that way, or teaching, leading a class. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I've had a number of people reach out to me, which is part of why we organized this panel too. I think, yeah, the digital humanities is one way to do it. I think it's a little across disciplines and like depending on the work you're doing, there's sometimes different methodologies. Like I think even if you're not necessarily going towards a programming focus role, I feel like learning Git would be like a useful way of trying to understand how tech companies work. So just going through, I have some tutorials on how to use GitHub. I know the programming historian does as well, to kind of learn some of that so that you could kind of understand the thinking process of how people collaborate and see how people collaborate on GitHub, because that's kind of, it's a bit indicative of the industry overall, I think. Yeah, informational interviews, I think it would be, I know that Katina Rogers has a book that's about putting the humanities PhD to work to think more expansively about how humanities training can be used across industries as well. And I mean, I'll plug the Write for DO program, but also I'm also looking for technical contract writers at SourceGraph, and that could be a way to kind of get your feet wet if you're interested. I will drop my email into the chat and the Write for Donations URL, but I think trying to have a, you know, I understand that everybody is going to have a different experience on the internet, so I don't want to say that you definitely need to have a public persona, but I would say that it has helped me in terms of getting people to recognize my work, getting people to recognize like my tech work as well. And yeah, thinking about how you kind of curate how you are viewed online and what your work is online could be a useful way of starting to get traction in those areas. But I understand that it's different for everybody.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Kevin Lewis. I just wanted to introduce myself because I kind of came in a little bit late. I mean, can I do that? I don't mean to disturb everyone. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I just heard that you have a technical background, and you spoke of Git, and I use that tool a lot. And I also have a technical background. I'm a student in the computer science department for the grad center. Yeah, I mean, some of the terms that you guys mentioned, like object-oriented programming, being able to break down, for example, an idea into like a series of sub ideas, like those are the things that I pretty much do. And yeah, it does help in your thought process. Like it does make it gives you an approach of how to solve a problem. I mean, there are many ways to solve a problem, but yeah, that object-oriented programming way is one way to do it as well. And I use that a lot. And one of the things that you mentioned, Lisa, is that you need to have an online presence to be able to showcase your work and also represent yourself. And that's one of the things I don't have, and I need to work on that. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself and, you know, and let everyone know what my background is. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, Baker, thank you, Kevin. Baker, your hand is raised.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I meant that to be the wave emoji and
Oh,
I hit
okay,
the wrong button.
sorry.
I was saying
Yeah.
hello to Kevin.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for
welcome.
being here.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think we could move on. I know, Erin, you had this question about roles in tech that don't require programming experience, and I actually have been thinking about that a bit. And let's see, I could try to do my slide again. So here is, and I shared this and I could share the link again, but here are a number of jobs that I think that I have seen a lot in the tech industry that are, some of them will have some requirement of technical background. But sometimes they are more open. I mean, for some of these, it's more important to have the not technical side of these things. And with the commitment to ramping up on like the learning of the subject domain, which is also another good thing that PhDs teach, is that you could learn a lot very quickly and synthesize that knowledge and output it in meaningful ways. So technical writer, documentation roles, curriculum roles, trainers, I see them a lot, internal training roles, just to help people with onboarding. To engineers, have to learn, software developers, engineers have to learn a lot very quickly, and they have to learn things as they're changing. So those kinds of roles exist to help the internal staff. There's developer relations and developer advocacy, which have various, depending on the company, will have various technical needs, but sometimes they don't. There's content writer and content marketing. There's other roles in marketing, like marketing coordinators, social media managers. If you like, talent and development, there's the roles in HR and people teams, and that could also tie into some of that internal training roles. There's project manager roles, technical program manager roles, which I think you could make a really good case for like dissertation work as falling into that. There's customer success, customer engineer roles, which are more building relationships with customers and helping support them in the use of a technical product. Solutions architects are often going to, set up a product, like a common place where this role is with AWS, Amazon Web Services, to help people set up their cloud infrastructure. But the teaching component is like a big component of that. And then there's support engineers, and I've known people who have gone the support engineer route with a PhD on their. Sometimes they like support engineering, and sometimes they move into like engineering of the product itself. But that's also like a way where you could make a big case for your teaching experience and like your relationship building experience there. Also, I see that there is a hand raised and I can't see who it is while I'm sharing my screen, but go ahead.
I wonder if it might be mine. This is Catherine Harris. Is there somebody else who wants to speak instead?
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't sure if you could hear me. I'm a faculty member at San Jose State, and I'm an alum from the Grad Center. And when we were doing digital humanities before we called it digital humanities, and one of the things that we're finding out in Silicon Valley at San Jose State, when we query all the tech firms around us about if they would hire humanities undergrads or our MA students from just our entire College of Humanities and Arts, the response was, heck yeah, we would hire you. We don't really know what the humanities does. So everything that was just laid out in terms of the potential jobs, I'm wondering if somebody can write that up as an informational piece to be distributed widely to humanities students around everywhere, not just PhD students, but I think undergraduates as well might be able to see their way clear to how they might leverage the tech community, both remotely and geographically in Silicon Valley. That was my question.
Yeah, I've been tweeting these things out. I mean, we, as you know, we all have full-time jobs and don't get paid for research, which is one of those things that's tricky about the field. And it's interesting to me that how quickly tech moves relatively, because I know Erin and I have talked about this, but we've been getting revisions for things from several years ago. So that's one of the places where there is I guess some friction. But I organized this panel to address some of those points, and yeah, I have a series of tweets that are linked to on this deck too that have some of those examples as well. I think so. Yeah, solutions architect I see in the chat. It depends on where you are, but a lot of these architecture roles are kind of setting up a given technical product for a customer. That's something that people will reach out to me about like recruiters for those roles. I do have a technical background, and yeah, we're going to record this and spread it too. I do have a technical background, so that might be part of it, but I think that is an area that somebody could start to move towards, even if they don't have a technical background today. Awesome. So I just wanted to make sure we could plug open roles. Speaking of jobs, I'm hiring a developer educator at SourceGraph. These are some other jobs that I think may be a good fit for humanities students that exist on the site, like as of a couple of days ago when I last looked. I don't know if the DigitalOcean crew wants to plug their role.
Yeah, we're hiring a DevOps technical writer. I'm not sure if there's anyone here that's done a lot of building and deploying to the cloud, but if you have, please get in touch. But I also want to say, keep an eye out. We'll be hiring more on our team in the months to come, and we're looking for folks with technical experience, and we're not really sure yet, but different focus areas. So keep your eye out, and maybe there will be something of interest to you.
Michelle, I don't know if you wanted to plug any roles.
Oh yeah, come work with me. So actually there is something I want to like call out about what is on the screen right now. We are a quickly growing company, like insanely quickly. I think we've increased by 50% since I've been there. I've been there 7 months, right? So we have these roles posted. We have on our hiring roadmap like 3 times as many roles. I don't have recruiting support for that, right? So, and I know that this is true in at least one other tech company, that like when you're in this like incredibly quick growth phase, there's stuff on the roadmap that's not on the site. So if you see something here that you're like, that is not my perfect fit, but I really want to work there, and they're hiring like generally that role, apply. Because I'm hiring 2 roles. So that senior curriculum developer, data engineering, that's my hire. If anybody knows data engineering, please reach out to me directly. But I'm also hiring 2 more just general data science curriculum developers. And there is probably like nothing better than taking your teaching experience and your research experience and becoming a curriculum developer to teach people tech skills. So like when you come to these pages, don't read it as the end all be all. It is not like an academic hiring line. It is like, we are hiring these roles as priority, and we probably have other things open. So if you want to work there, put in your resume. Not saying something will always come in, but it's always worth a try.
I think we could move on to like audience questions for the last 15 minutes, but we did want to plug this Discord server that Erin made. Erin, do you want to share?
This is a big experiment, but I thought if folks wanted to continue this conversation after this Zoom, or share job opportunities or ask questions, it could be a place where we could chat. If you haven't used Discord before, the sign up experience can sometimes be a little wonky, but yeah, try it out and persevere. Jeanelle, right? Jeanelle, you made it in last night, so hopefully others can make it in too.
I will share all the links in the chat. Let's see, there's a few questions here. Work-life balance and pace of work in your current roles. How does your workload compare to your previous roles in academia? Does that resonate with somebody?
It's good. That's all. It is really good. I end at 5:06 precisely I try to leave at 5:06 seems to be the time, but like I don't take work home. sometimes if I like need to step out during the middle of the day for like a baby's doctor appointment, I like step out, I come back, and like I might make up the hours in the morning, but I actually don't have to. But I also don't want to take advantage of that. So I try to make up the hours over the course of the week. That's it. I never, ever, ever take work home. Full stop, ever. It's amazing. I still teach at CUNY. So of course I do actually take work home, but it's not work for my full-time job.
Yeah, I feel like academia I don't know what everyone's experiences are, but for me, academia normalized just like always having a grant project and 3 research papers and peer review and an editorial decision. Like there was just never not work, and that was just a constant background stress. And that plus the feeling of trying to secure, you know, a tenure track job or even just a more stable job made life just miserable for me personally. And I don't think I'm the only one that happened to. So for me, that has been one of the #1 benefits of leaving academia. And one thing we haven't talked about in this panel is like the identity crisis that might be a part of deciding to move, which was huge for me. But I have not looked back. I am so much healthier and happier. I don't know if that's TMI, but I feel like I want to be emphatic about that.
I have a question. I think it was Michelle who talked about how people in the humanities actually are better at object-oriented programming because of seeing interrelationships or something like that. Could you elaborate on it? Because that's fascinating.
So better might be overstating my case. I don't want to put the like better or worse, but I do want to say like have a particularly good way of like breaking things down and being like, this part of the problem can be contained, and then this part of the problem can be contained. As an example, like right now, I'm proposing a complete reorganization of how we produce content, and never would have been able to even tackle that problem if I didn't have the training that came with writing the dissertation and like thinking about how to break that question down. Like that exact like thinking skill applied to that particular problem. And it's not the first time I've seen something like that, where it's like somebody has this like deep humanities background and is just able to view a problem and compartmentalize it in a way that like others weren't able to.
Oh, so it's more about breaking a problem down to its elements to be able to solve it, right?
Yeah, because you can't solve everything. Like the study of everything is the study of nothing. But like breaking something down into digestible units is a particular type of like way of thinking, I think.
Because that's what humanities are taught. Like,
I think a lot of humanities are taught that about like how to structure your thinking and like structure your approach to a problem. Although I come from like one tradition in the humanities, others might speak more to that, but.
Okay, I was just curious because you're right, because the problem can be overwhelming, but if you break it to its compartments, then you can tackle the smaller pieces and it becomes more like digestible. The reason why I'm asking is because a lot of tech problems are actually rooted in like the humanities, because it's about a lot of tech companies try to understand people through AI. However, the way to understand people is through the classics, like you read classic literature. So that's really interesting how you like kind of brought that up. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I dropped a link. There's a Nature article from 2020 about how natural language aptitude had more bearing on programming ability than math aptitude. Just as there was some research about it. Yeah, I saw that there was a question about salary. I think actually kind of combining that with that previous question about like work-life balance, I would say that I like the compensation in tech compared to academia there's a big difference. I think it depends a lot on like what like different roles, different companies. There has been a lot of conversation on Twitter about, because there's been this, like that conversation around like the Great Resignation that's like the media has been belaboring, but I think that also means that the labor market in tech is tighter, and it's more competitive to get good candidates. So there have been changes in compensation that have been like noted, and some places that you could check for learning about tech salaries more is levels.fyi, which is a website that has that information. Something to think about with tech too is that there's often like equity involved, and that's something that you should definitely learn more about. I'm not an accountant or a lawyer, but you're all researchers here. Yeah. Was there other questions that any of the panelists saw? I know it was moving quickly.
I think Rafa had a question about visa sponsorship. Don't know if you addressed that.
Okay, yeah, visa sponsorship, it was going to depend a lot on the company itself. And also I know it depends on the country too. And I know that there are some countries that definitely favor STEM degrees versus other degrees. But it's really like a case-by-case basis there. I think bigger companies are more likely to sponsor visas, like the Amazons and Googles.
Caitlin, to the point that you made in the chat about like tenure track salaries. So I was super curious one day, and a project manager at Codecademy, like starting level 1 project manager, makes more than a CUNY tenure track assistant professor. Like, and a project manager is like a organization superhero and keeps everybody together, and organization and communication superhero. I think it helps to have tech awareness for that role. Like let's say you've taken a Codecademy programming class. Like maybe you spent, I don't know, 3 weeks and you're like, this is the thing I'm going to learn. Like having that level of awareness is, I think, helpful, but it's not a prerequisite. And like being so I sometimes think that like to this point about like tech, non-tech roles in tech, I think we have this like model of like, who is a tech worker? And it's like somebody fresh out of college, they're early 20s, they have a CS degree. And like, I know for my team, no one fits that mold, not a single person. Like on engineering, there are some of them and they come in, they're like engineer level 1. But if you're coming in with some grad education, like you have more experience and you have more to give. That's like at a higher organizational level and a higher people development level. And there's so much that goes beyond just writing lines of code all day. And like, yeah, there's someone who's going to write lines of code all day, but they're not going to have the rich background that you bring to it, coming from like a more circuitous path that is really quite, I would say, in my immediate circle, which is like product and curriculum, everyone has this incredibly diverse path that has gotten them there and makes them super interesting people, you know? So
that's brilliant, Michelle. That is really brilliant. I really appreciate your perspective. This has been, because I'm a technologist, but listening to people in the humanities discuss, thank you. This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Awesome. If there's no other questions, are there any closing thoughts among our panelists?
I have a question. I guess I always have a lot of questions. What's like the motivation for someone wanting to transition from the humanities to like technology? What's the why usually?
And beyond the fact that the job market is like in the toilet and has been for the last decade.
No, I get it. 2008 was an awful year that essentially the fall of Lehman bankrupted the whole global economy. So no, I get it. Yeah, I was just curious. because I'm an investor too. So it's kind of good to understand people's perspectives, to know how to help. So I appreciate that.
For me, like my individual path is I was always interested in technology. And I think I'm not, maybe not humanist, but people often forget that language is a kind of technology too. And I think that my interests across like those domains are very similar. And I think that technology is a tool where you could innovate and create knowledge and share knowledge. And that's what's important to me. And I'm happy to do that where I think I can make the biggest impact. And right now I feel that that doing open source and open access in tech is the way for me to do that right now.
I really appreciate it, because I feel like even if you think about Einstein, who created the theory of relativity, they kind of used it to create the atomic bomb. So if the world had more humanity in it, there wouldn't like the epitome of scientific achievement wouldn't have been used to kill people. So I really appreciate this discussion, because it's very important, especially with the craziness of Silicon Valley, because it's overpriced. Yeah, thank you.
So Sean, would you like to wrap us up?
Yeah, sure. Before I wrap up, I was wondering if the panelists could share their social media handles, or where folks could follow you or stay in contact with you beyond this discussion, if you're open to that. And I'd like to thank you. I think that this has been a really generative and fruitful, and it feels like a lifesaver being thrown in a lot of ways. So I'm really appreciating you all presenting so thoughtfully and so generously. This discussion will be recorded, and we'll be sharing it out with the panelists first, and then publicly as soon as we can get it out. But I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to present this information. It's been really a really helpful, generative conversation. Thank you so much. Oh, and for everybody else, I shared a little bit of information on applying to Haystack in the chat, but I can drop that link again too. Please consider applying if you're not already active in Haystack. And yes, please, a lot of people are sharing their appreciation for this conversation in the comments. I hope you all are seeing that.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming and for all your great questions. And yeah, I think we shared all our details in the chat, but we could also share that again when the video goes live. And thanks fellow panelists for joining.
Thank you so much. This was super helpful, and especially the comments about the circuitous path and the lack of desire to over specialize actually being a boon. And I've also done a weird amount of project managing stuff in grad school, which I apparently I'm like weird, like secretly that's my superpower, and I never knew. So like I'm actually really happy about this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you everybody so much. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.